Hey ghosts, welcome to the weirdest commentary channel on YouTube. Prove me wrong. Today I'm reviewing/experiencing Journeys Out of the Body, a book by Robert Monroe. I've been studying and practicing the gateway experience for a while now, and this book came to me through Fate and Royal Mail. I'm going to cover the insights that this book gives into having an out-of-body experience. I actually briefly talked about this book last year when I made a video about other people's gateway experiences. That's when I started reading this book, last summer. I haven't been reading it one word a day. I had to stop because I had too much on my plate. Shortly after I started reading it, I also travelled to Germany and Italy, and I was staying in hostels, and I don't know how people would feel about me vibrating on the top bunk. Actually, no, I do know how they would feel. Hostels suck sometimes. So the book documents how Monroe first discovered out-of-body experiences. By accident. Back in the 50s, he just started feeling vibrations all of a sudden and then one day slipped out of his body. His first encounter was his hand going through the floor, and I mentioned this in the last video because he spoke to a doctor about it and this doctor encouraged him to see where it leads. Doctor, I'm scared when I do this. Okay, well, do it more. See what happens. The first time Monroe fully left his body, he thought he was dead. So in a panic, flew back into his body, woke up and smoked. What a vibe. My year of out-of-body experiences and relaxation. Early on, he talks about being embarrassed about it all and not being able to find anyone to talk to, until he discovers the underground group of astral projectors. I love the idea of there being this eclectic group of people down back alleyways, having hushed conversations about leaving their bodies, scattering at the sound of police sirens. This was written in the 50s and 60s and published in 1971, so that could have happened. He says that active people who talk about their experiences openly are heroes to the astral projection community. Oh shucks. Monroe also talks about going to a meeting of the minds in the 60s. Psychiatrists, psychologists, scientists, al. He says, several have seriously stated that I should run, not walk, to the nearest psychiatrist. None present offered his services. He presented evidence to the group to win them over, which was basically many accounts of him going on out-of-body journeys, visiting people, and then being able to recall exactly what they were doing, and they were unaware of his presence. And a lot of things lined up. He was able to tell what they were wearing, what they were saying, where they were standing. He brought up that in one experience, he visited a woman that he works with and he pinched her in the side. And then when he asked her about it in real life, she was like, yeah, I felt that. I also have a bruise. He does this to several women throughout his journeys. He's just out there pinching everybody. I do actually get quite a lot of mystery bruises. Not cute, Robert. In the book, he tackles the question of when you leave your body, where do you go? And he says that there are 3 second state environments. The first he calls locale 1, which is the here and now. Basically, you will be in this world at this time. So if you choose to have your out-of-body experience, say at night, when most people are sleeping, then you're only going to be able to see other people sleeping. This was his example of a bad time, and honestly, until I read this, that's largely when I was trying to do out-of-body experiences. And he does admit that it's the best time of day to feel relaxed and get into the vibrations, but at best it's boring, at worst it's creepy. However, what if I wanted to remote view across the world in a different time zone? Then the timing kind of makes more sense, but he does also specify that in order to visit someone, you have to float there. So if I wanted to visit someone, I'd have to fly through the sky like a bird. What's interesting to me about this is that he talks about how disorienting it is because you're not used to seeing the world from above in a bird's eye view. And this is where, in the world of Google Maps, this is not a problem. I am a geo-wizard. I have committed to memory the aerial views of so many cities from all my travels. Have you ever been to Germany? They have no internet. All you have is your mind. I also do this thing where I can recall memories from a different point of view from where I experienced them. I think I have very acute spatial awareness. But he then says that in Locale 1, if you just think of a person, then you'll zap to them. No need for directions, you just go. I guess Monroe didn't know that at first, so thank you for letting us know. Monroe floated so we could zap. Locale 2 is what Monroe calls infinity eternity. And the person who owned this book before me has highlighted a lot of this chapter. Locale 2 is a state of being where that which we label thought is the wellspring of existence. Locale 2 is the natural environment of the second body. Monroe seems kinda scared of Locale 2. He did say that it's unrecognisable and presented to him his deepest fears. But he also says that he reckons most humans visit Locale 2 when we sleep. It's not clear whether he thinks it's a nightmare place or whether it just slightly unsettles him because it's unfamiliar. But again, I think I don't have the same fears as this guy from the 60s. I bring this up a lot and I apologise if people don't relate, but I have synesthesia. Whenever I think of time or numbers or any other concepts like that, I see them in my head on a map and they're floating in a dark space. This is what I pictured when I thought of Locale 2, and this is what I pictured when I just referenced that Monroe was from the 60s. It's involuntary and it's constantly overlaid as this part of my mind that I'm referencing. So I think for me it's not that scary to experience a world that doesn't really exist. My brain's quite comfortable there. In fact, I'm beginning to wonder if Locale 2 has informed my sense of reality. Then we have Locale 3, and as I started this chapter, I noticed that there's a weird mark inside the book. It's not on either side, somehow it's inside. I wonder if the person who owned this book before me went on an out-of-body experience and dropped the book and it bruised. Anyway, Monroe called Locale 3 reverse image, but I think he should have called it the hole. Locale 3 is accessed by feeling the vibrations, rotating your body 180 degrees and crawling through a hole. In the initial hole experiences, Monroe would just put his hands in to see what he could feel, and what he could feel was other hands. In one interaction, his hand is passed around and then stabbed by a hook. Yeah, we definitely have different fears. For some reason, he decided it was still a good idea to put his entire body through the hole. And then he discovered that the world inside there is in fact like ours, but not quite. It's like a parallel universe. One of the differences that he dwells on is that there are cars made of wood that are powered by radioactive fluids. And he can't interact with the people of this world unless he takes over a body of a person who lives there. So he finds a guy whose mind and body he repeatedly takes over in order to interact with the people of the world. And in true Freaky Friday fashion, he keeps coming into this guy's life at moments and he doesn't have a clue what the guy was actually doing, and then sort of screws them up. He appears during a date, he appears at the moment that this guy is telling his friends and family that he's getting married, and he appears during what seems to be quite an important work thing in a lab. It's kind of unethical. He eventually appears when the guy is in a self-driving car with his wife and child, and Monroe assumes his body, manages to crash the car ever so slightly, and then turns to the wife and says, "I'm not who you think I am," and then leaves. And then the next visit, the guy's divorced, and Monroe genuinely does not make a connection there. Then the wife gives the guy another chance, but Monroe forgets the address that she gave him to meet up at, and so the guy just remains alone. And Monroe takes no responsibility. It's kind of like Roy in Rick and Morty, except rather than playing the whole game, you just show up at certain levels and ruin it. Monroe believes that your consciousness continues to live in your second body after death, and he recalls basically interacting with deceased people during his journeys. He also talks about when he's on these journeys, he feels like someone is helping and guiding him, but he's not really aware of who that is. I wondered if they were other gatewayers, but then Monroe doesn't seem to help anyone when he goes on his journeys, so I guess we'll never know. He says that a side effect of having out-of-body journeys out-of-body experiences? Out-of-body experiences. What's wrong with me? He says that a side effect of having out-of-body experiences is precognition and being able to see the future. This chapter was quite eerie to me. He has an out-of-body experience where he's in a plane crash. I'm going to spare us all the uncomfortableness of how a man from the 50s/60s speaks and describes other people, but he essentially sees a group of people bored, then someone who looks like his friend. He observes that the woman sitting in front of him is anxious, and then the plane crashes. And essentially his out-of-body experience ends there. 3 weeks later, in the real world, he's taking a flight. He's getting a bus to the airport and a group of people board that kind of match the description of the group of people that boarded the plane in his vision. Then the bus driver looks exactly like Monroe's friend, and he observes that the woman sitting in front of him is very anxious. But the bus doesn't crash, and the plane doesn't crash. In fact, several days after he's been on the plane, Monroe has a heart attack, but he lives to tell the tale. He thinks that the plane crash was a creative premonition for his heart attack. The circumstances that he noted and matched up were cues to him having a near-death experience. And this is interesting to me because I experience a precognition phenomenon that doesn't sound the same as him, and I also don't know how to explain. And some people will tell me that it's not that I am having a dream and then living it, it's that I have a lapse in writing memories. In that moment, I think that I'm recalling something, but I'm actually just writing the memory now, and it's kind of like deja vu. But that's also not it. I don't know how to explain it. Monroe also explores what happens to the body and mind when you're having an out-of-body experience. And I think his ideas on what's happening in the mind are interesting. He says that when you first enter the second state, that your primary subjective drives are strongly evident, demanding to be heeded or satisfied. What are these primary drives? Fear and sexuality. So he explores fears throughout the book. It's one of the things that you have to overcome in order to get into the second state. But sexuality has its own chapter. It's fascinating to me to read what someone from this time period thinks on this subject matter, because you can feel how repressed society is. This is pre-60s free love movement. He feels that sex has been unfairly represented as evil, and I agree with him. Lust is one of the 7 deadly sins. He points out that, like food, this necessity was manipulated in man's history again and again under artificial rules and taboos to exercise control over the mass populace. Well done, Monroe. He also points out that at this point in history, about 90% of psychologists subscribe to Freud's methods and practices, and that links everything to sex, yet no one is prepared to talk about it. I think it's also reflective of how in the past therapy was seen as embarrassing and taboo. Nowadays, a healthy approach to sex and regular therapy is the dream. Marry me. But anyway, Monroe basically experiences strong sexual urges when he enters the second state. And his description of what happens is a reference from a film. This is my favourite chapter. In a Gene Autry western, Gene would fight the villains to save the girl. And he would move in close to kiss her, telling her how pretty she is, and she'd move in, ready for the kiss, and he'd go, "But first, I want to play you a little song," and then would brandish a guitar out of nowhere and end the movie on a song. The Hays Code, ladies and gentlemen. He reports feeling really distressed and ashamed of his thoughts and desires when he's in the second state, and he's genuinely very worried about cheating on his wife. But he seems to push through because he goes on to describe his sexual experiences in the second state. The two truly intermingle, not just at surface level and at one or two specific body parts, but in full dimension, atom for atom, throughout the entire second body. The moment reaches unbearable ecstasy and then tranquility, equalization, and it is over. So at the end of the book, he goes into the techniques of accessing the second state. I'm going to talk about them here, but I will put them into practice and explore them in another video coming very soon. You need to relax your body and mind. And this is a barrier for me. Someone commented in another gateway video of mine that I think too much. And you're right, I know. I'm going to try though. It's just non-stop. He does offer 4 methods of how to get relaxed, so I'm hoping one of those will work for me. Then it's vibration time. You lie down with your body on a north-south axis with your head facing magnetic north. The book does not come with a compass, but I'm hoping my phone will help me out there. Remove any jewellery and make sure that your clothing is loose. Darken the room, but don't be in total darkness. I think that's for the benefit of your second body being able to see your first body. He says, make sure that you won't be disturbed, and uses the example of a phone ringing. Again, a problem of the past. I couldn't even tell you what my ringtone is. I have never heard it. My challenge is a cat jumping on me. Usually I don't make it through a video without that happening. He's down there, by the way. Do cats have out-of-body experiences? He vibrates with his eyes shut all the time. Once in the position and relaxed, you say a mantra. I will consciously perceive and remember all that I encountered during this relaxation period. I will recall in detail when I am completely awake only those matters that will be beneficial to my physical and mental being. I'm gonna struggle to remember all that. And you have to say it 5 times. You then begin breathing through your half-open mouth and you establish the vibration waves whilst looking through your eyelids. Through your eyelids, you look at a position 1 foot away from your forehead, then 3 feet away, then 6 feet away. Then you mentally pull the vibrations into your head. If you're successful, you'll feel a surging, hissing, rhythmically. If successful, you'll feel a surging, hissing, rhythmically pulsating wave of fiery sparks come roaring into your head. Once your whole body is vibrating, it's time to control the vibrations. He says, acclimatize and accommodate. Basically, stop being scared and get used to this.
Get your ass up and
Astral project. Manipulate and modulate, which is basically controlling the vibrations and directing them to a certain area. The faster they are, the easier it should be for you to leave your body. Then you move on to release of extremities, which honestly made me think about pissing myself. And that's not what it is. It didn't happen. It's about stretching your limbs out further than they physically are in order to touch things around the room and pass through them and then return to the size that you actually are. Then it's time to find a disassociation technique. He says you should think about how nice it would be to float. Really think about how nice it would be. Nice is in italics. And I just can't help but read it in a sarcastic tone. It would be real nice to float out of my body. Real nice. You can also roll out, but he says not to do this too quickly or you might end up like a log in a river. And the cartoon fan inside me wants to see that. At the end of the book, Monroe gives a sort of rationale for all of this. He proposes that religious experiences, dreams, and even mental illness are all experiences of the second body. And in his final paragraph says that, in the year 2025, a boy in Locale 1 pushes a button on a device. I've just realised he spelled pushes wrong. I perceive the signal and turn my attention to him. Hi there, son, I greet him warmly. And my great-great-grandchild smiles in recognition. Then he closes the book with an epilogue of a medical report that makes sure you know that he's not insane. So that's Journeys Out of the Body. I can honestly say that I understand the out-of-body experience better and how to identify it. In my last videos, I talked about how I might be having OBEs, but they were definitely just lucid dreaming. Although Monroe would argue that when we're dreaming, we are using our second body. But I wasn't doing the floating and vibrating and all that kind of stuff. So that's my next challenge. Another gateway video is on its way soon. Let me know if you've had any experiences with this and what you think of Monroe's book, whether you've read it or just heard my review. And maybe I'll see you in one of the locales. Ciao!